Could we see a significant trade between the St. Louis Blues and the New York Rangers? We'll discuss that possibility as well as some trade talk around the New York Islanders. When will we see changes with the struggling Vancouver Canucks? We also have further updates on the Pittsburgh Penguins possibly being sold, a huge deal for the LA Kings and their arena name signing rights, and we also have word on some NHL waiver claims and more injuries, fines, COVID issues, all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of news and rumors to talk about here today. Let's get started. Now, first up, we saw a pretty significant, kind of neat and cool milestone last night in the Anaheim Ducks game. As we talked about yesterday, as a possibility is the team and captain Ryan Getzlaf were both closing in on key milestones. So we saw Ryan Getzlaf get point number 1,000 in his NHL career last night. And then thanks to a overtime goal by youngster Trevor Zegras, the Anaheim Ducks won the game, then giving them their 1,000th victory in team history as well. So the team wins their 1,000th game. Getzlaf as captain gets his 1,000 points, of course, all with them. So it's kind of a neat milestone that we saw. Zegras had quite the celebration. Of course, did the same thing we saw Jack Hughes do a while back earlier this season, tossing his stick into the crowd while celebrating his overtime winner. So that was something that was kind of neat last night. We also saw something that's a little unusual as well. We saw Detroit captain Dylan Larkin get pulled from the game mid-game due to COVID protocols. So apparently one of the tests that he had completed earlier today, the results were not back before the game started, but there was a positive test result that came through while the game was going on. So he had to be removed from the game for safety purposes. So that's not something you see very often. So that's unfortunate for them. Also saw another case of Vegas having another player in COVID protocols, this time former Maple Leaf Michael Amadio, who they had picked up not too long ago. As I've mentioned before, with the Senators taking so long to be shut down, it's a matter of time. And Vegas was, I believe, their first home game after they returned from that U.S. road trip where they clearly picked up the virus somewhere along the way and it started spreading through the team. So now Vegas is having new cases every day. So again, like I said before, in my opinion, the NHL waited too long to shut things down, and now it's spreading at a much faster pace here. So we'll see where things goes on that front. We did have another claim today, also involving the Vegas Golden Knights, also involving a former Toronto Maple Leaf, current Montreal Canadian forward Adam Brooks, who the Habs had claimed off waivers from the Leafs not that long ago. He really didn't see a whole lot of action with Montreal. They put him on waivers, and now he's a member of the Vegas Golden Knights, who of course need some bodies after having some issues, of course, with themselves because of the players out due to the COVID stuff. So Brooks will join the Vegas Golden Knights here in due time. So that's another player on the move here this year. There's a few former Maple Leafs now that they've acquired early on in this season. A couple quick updates when it comes to fines and injuries as well. Brendan Gallagher of the Montreal Canadiens has been fined $2,500, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but it's the most that's allowed based on the collective bargaining agreement. His fine is for roughing against Rangers forward Barclay Goodrow. So essentially, if you weren't watching the game last night, it was late in the game. The Rangers had a 1-goal lead against Montreal. Montreal was trying to tie things up. Barclay Goodrow was certainly, I guess you could say, having a little bit of a verbal spat with Gallagher. They were tangled up, and Gallagher just hauled off and socked him right in the face and kind of, I don't know if he really called it a sucker punch, but he punched him pretty good. Without being physically provoked, at least. Goodrow was giving it to him pretty good verbally, and certainly, not unusual for Gallagher to try to do something like that. But to me, it was really dumb on his part. There was not a lot of time left in the game. Montreal was trying to get things tied up, and instead he puts himself in the penalty box, and now he gets a fine on top of that, which financially for what he's earning isn't really a huge deal, but still, I don't think it's really worth it for him for the multiple forms of implication that comes with it. So that's what happened there. I know as Habs fans, I would think would be not happy with this. I know I wouldn't be, at least. So we'll see how Montreal fans seem to feel about that. We also got word when it comes to Habs forward Matthew Perreault. Apparently he needs eye surgery, some kind of corrective surgery for his eye. So I'm not sure how long he's going to be out. Sasha Barkov, captain of the Florida Panthers, also had a scary incident last night in the game versus the Islanders. Had a not so good looking collision with Islanders defenseman Scott Mayfield. It looked like it was kind of like a knee-on-knee scenario. I don't really think you can say there was any intent on Mayfield's part. It was kind of one of those big hits with an unfortunate outcome. But Barkov does seem to have dodged a bullet here where it's not too serious. There doesn't seem to be any structural damage, no surgery required. They are listing him as week to week. So that's good. I know there was reports from George Richards, who covers the Panthers, saying that there was sightings of Barkov in the hall after the game, walking around like he seemed to be getting around okay. So, at least you could tell that it wasn't too serious. So he might be out a week or two, but it could have been significantly worse. We could have been talking months had he ended up like Sammy Blais, for example, with an ACL injury or something along those lines. But either way, the Panthers have been winning and having a solid start to the year here. So that's a big blow to them, but I think they have the depth to overcome and deal with the loss there while he's out. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have some significant news in the Los Angeles Kings organization today. They signed a absolutely monster deal for a naming rights package. Of course, their arena has been called Staples Center for a long time now, since 1999. So the deal that they signed actually with Staples was actually a 20-year deal. That 20-year deal they signed was for $120 million. That was, of course, keep in mind, like 1999, so, quite some time ago. And now they signed a new deal with Crypto.com. So it's going to be the Crypto.com. I don't know if it's Arena, Center, what they're going to call it exactly. Kind of going to sound weird after calling it Staples Center for so long. But this deal is also a 20-year deal worth $700 million. That is absolutely insane. So as much as it might have an odd ring to it with the arena name, I don't think the Kings could say no to that kind of financial package being offered here by Crypto.com. So obviously that's a ton of money. It takes effect on Christmas Day, December 25th this year, and the arena will officially have its new name moving forward. So it'll be interesting to see what other kind of deals we see across the league and other professional sports, because that's certainly going to set the tone a lot higher than a lot of other naming right deals that we've seen here in recent years for NHL or other sports franchises. Now, as I mentioned as well, we do have plenty of other items to talk about today, but before we get into that, I do want to pause for a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. And guess what? Hockey fans are buzzing because hockey is back. Want to know what else is buzzing? The Lawnmower 4.0 from our friends at Manscaped, who are the global leaders in male grooming, trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. I highly recommend the Performance Package 4.0, which includes their new state-of-the-art Lawnmower 4.0, as well as some other great features. The lawnmower itself has a 7,000 RPM motor, a new multifunction switch that can engage as a travel lock, gives you the ability to turn on an LED spotlight as well for a more precise shave. Also, as I've mentioned on numerous occasions before, Manscaped is about much more than just a trimmer. They have everything, all aspects covered in male grooming, including some great formulations like their brand new ultra premium body wash to keep you smelling great all day long. It's certainly a big hit here. I absolutely love it. They also have other exfoliators and gels to keep all aspects of your grooming needs covered. I highly recommend you check out manscaped.com. Use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com using promo code TSH. So thanks very much for watching our promotional content. I do greatly appreciate it. On to the rest of our news here today. We have some further updates on the potential sale for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Of course, as we talked about in the last day or so here, of course, owners Mario Lemieux and Ron Burkle are in heavy talks, progress talks here with Fenway Group to have these teams sold to them. Of course, we do get a little bit more information and clarity on how this might work. Of course, this deal is not a done deal. It's not a sign on the dotted line yet, so things could obviously change until the deal is done. It's not done, as they say. But Lemieux is expected to remain on in some sort of a minority role. Not quite clear the exact percentage that he's expected to retain ownership with, but essentially he'll still be on a day-to-day basis. He'll still be probably much more of a hands-on owner than the actual, the company here that's going to own the majority stake. At least it's expected to be that way. But clearly the company, Fenway Group has tons of money. So there's obviously that's good when your ownership is very financially sound. There is word as well that this sale might even get close to $900 million. I mean, it was reported that, or rumored at least a few years ago, I think it was back in 2017 or 18, maybe it was 19, it was in the last 2-3 years anyway, that the Penguins were having some discussions about possibly selling the team then, and apparently the NHL stepped in and wouldn't allow them to sell the team for any less than $750 million, and I believe the offer, I'm not sure what company it was with at the time, was clearly less than that. And of course, they want to protect their franchise's values, and one sale will certainly impact another, and so on. We've seen all the sales, including expansion teams coming in, increase incrementally here over the last 10 to 20 years. So that they obviously want to keep that going. But clearly, with the amount of money that Seattle just paid as an expansion fee, they want to get well above that and kind of set the bar even higher here. So we'll see where that goes. But from what we've also learned, it sounds like ownership, the new ownership that is, will be pretty well keeping on either just about or possibly even everybody in the management sector. So when it comes to your, like Brian Burke, Ron Hextall, etc., they're not expected to be going anywhere as far as team philosophy goes. Not expected to really change much when it comes to the futures of guys like Malkin and Letang, which we talked about before. That's the first thing that came to my mind when this happened, is what does it mean for them? They're in contract years. The Penguins aren't having a great season right now, so what does this mean for their future? Do they want to retain them? Do they want to maybe move in a new direction? And apparently the new ownership group is not really fond of rebuilds, so they're not expected to really tear anything down, and they seem to be open to the idea of keeping these guys around because clearly they would help sell merchandise, they'll help sell tickets, and they'll kind of keep that legacy going. So I don't really think it's going to mean a whole lot from a day-to-day perspective or any substantial drastic changes. And as I mentioned, when it comes to anybody can be concerned about ownership relocating, that's definitely not going to happen. For a couple of things, the NHL has rules in place that an owner cannot buy a team. They have to wait so long before they can even apply to have the team moved. And even then, the Penguins have I can't remember how many years left on their lease right now with the arena, but it's a substantial period of time. It's 20 years or something really, really long. So there's no issues there at all. I would not expect anything. There's no concerns. There's nothing to be worried about in the least. Now, on to some trade talk for today. There is a lot of talk about a few teams that need to make a move here. One of them being Vancouver. Now, based on what we've learned from the meeting between Jim Benning and owner Francesco Aquilini in the past day or so, it sounds like the ownership group there is going to continue to have a patient approach. So the meeting that was basically just what's going on, why is this team losing, and it sounds like they're going to continue to bide some time here for Benning and head coach Travis Green to get things turned around. Now, if you look at this ownership group's history, they don't tend to make a lot of changes during the season. They almost always do their coaching changes after the year. So I would suspect there's a good chance Travis Green probably won't be let go based on their past history. And when it comes to Jim Benning, I wouldn't necessarily say he definitely makes it through the year, but I think that they won't consider making that change until they have their next candidate lined up to take over. So it would be a situation where they've always transitioned very quickly. There's not going to be or at least not likely to be, based on history, a case where they fire Benning, let an assistant or something take over on a temporary interim basis, and then go on a search to find their next guy. I think they'll have their guy lined up if they decide to do that, that is, and then make the changes, boom, and be done. That seems to be the way they like to do things, and that's what history suggests they will likely do. But as I mentioned before, with this team not looking any better, you have to think that Benning's likely going to do something to try to save his job. So I would not be surprised, and I would be quite surprised if we don't see some kind of a move here made to shake up this roster and change things up in some capacity. Although I do think with the way Benning has handled the roster and the cap and everything else, I don't think he's got a ton of options unless he's going to move, a bright piece of the future, like a Brock Besser or something. Is he going to do that? I wouldn't think, but unless he does, I just don't know what else he could really do. There's a lot of unfavorable contracts on this team, and I just don't know that he can really pull anything off too drastic without doing something like Horvat, Besser, Miller. It'd have to be a key piece that's been important to them. So I'm just not sure we're going to see that. So I have a funny feeling it might be status quo in Vancouver here for a little while before we really see anything significant. But that's just my take on that. When it comes to the New York Islanders, obviously they're suffering from another injury here in Ryan Pulock, another key defenseman. They're arguably their top defenseman out 4 to 6 weeks. So that's a big blow. They're also going to be without Josh Bailey. So a couple of key vets there that are going to miss the home opener that they've been waiting for all season. That home opener finally comes this weekend. So obviously they hope to get things turned around here. The Islanders have not had a great start to the year, but they also had an extended road trip to start the year because their arena wasn't ready. So that's really not helped matters here. And as they finally get home, hopefully they can get things turned around. But now they get some, they're banged up a bit, have some injuries to deal with. And there's already been talk because of the absence of Nick Leddy since the start of the year that they needed a defenseman who could play top 4 minutes and move the puck. And now that's just that much more important if they're going to be without Pulock, for a while. So I would be quite surprised if we don't see some sort of move here out of Lou Lamoriello sometime soon. They can't rely very heavily on Chara and Green. That's proven to be not a wise idea this year. We've certainly noticed the difference in both their play and how, obviously age is catching up to them. They're certainly lost a step for sure. We've seen them previously linked to guys like Samuel Girard in Colorado. We've seen them linked to Hampus Lindholm in Anaheim. But you have to think with the Ducks doing so well right now that's maybe not going to happen. Girard, even though the Avalanche are doing okay, but they're certainly not having the great start that they were hoping for. But I think that's still a possibility because they could do a swap there that would, possibly be like a hockey trade to benefit both sides. Whereas when it comes to Lindholm, I just don't know. And there's other defensemen that, they could be looking at. Like there's been rumors about Justin Hall, Travis Dermott, all those, but there's just not that impact defenseman that they're really going to be able to, really have that impact from. So I just don't see it happening. But either way, Lou Lamoriello has to address that blue line. They're, getting into their stretch of home games now, that new arena, and they need to fix it. Otherwise, this team, who likely many considered, myself included, to be a Stanley Cup contender, will be in danger to even miss the playoffs. They're sitting at the bottom of their division right now, and it's, they need to do something there to fix things. And I'd be curious to see how quickly Lou makes a move. Now, of course, the other big trade that I want to possibly talk about here today, the big rumor that came from the Cold Stove podcast, wondering about Tarasenko to St. Louis, possibly for a package including Kravtsov and Jones. Now, of course, as we know, Tarasenko has a trade request that still stands with the St. Louis Blues. We know the Blues may not be super anxious to make that trade right now, given the fact that Tarasenko has played well. He hasn't, no signs of the injury being an issue anymore. And, the team is doing all right. So you really don't want to give up a good player like that. But, this is a deal. If it goes down, it's probably not going to be anytime soon. It's probably going to be a couple months down the road. And it's going to depend on where both teams are at. If the Blues kind of slow down a little bit here, and if the Rangers continue to be in the mix, then I do think the odds are going to increase. It could happen. Now, keep in mind with the St. Louis Blues, Doug Armstrong is a GM that if he's not super convinced his team is a contender for the Cup, even though they might be heading for the playoffs, he will subtract from his team to get those future assets. He's done it before. He did that with the Paul Stastny trade to the Winnipeg Jets a few years back. Like, it's not that unusual. He will do that. So to me, if he's not convinced they're a Cup contender, I can see him doing this deal, because the package of Kravtsov and Jones, if that's indeed what the return would be much more of a futures package for sure. Both of those players are great prospects, but likely wouldn't have an immediate impact. I mean, Kravtsov could join them at the end of the year once his KHL season is over, so that's a possibility. Tarasenko, of course, we know that he wanted to be moved, and New York is one of the areas he was really fond of going to. He could play with his buddy Artemi Panarin, which would be attractive to him as well. Would be a great fit in their top six. He's playing good right now. Now, of course, there is a real chance here that the Rangers might decide to make amends with Kravtsov and not go down that road. But clearly, if they feel this is a year when they can truly make some playoff noise and contend, you have to think there's a chance they can do it. I mean, they've been linked to some big names since the offseason and haven't really followed through as of yet, or kind of fell out of the mix, including Jack Eichel. And this isn't the first time that Tarasenko to the Rangers has been discussed in the rumor mill as a real possibility. So clearly, I think they've been, toying with the idea of doing something significant. Of course, they want to wait for the right time to make sure that they're not, spending assets for the wrong time, and they don't jump the gun if they're not really in a position to contend. But clearly, this team looks pretty solid right now. They have one heck of a goaltender. The blue line looks good. They're scoring well. You add Tarasenko to the mix, that would be a tremendous pickup. But like I said, a lot of this is going to depend on the Blues. Right now, there doesn't seem to be a lot of pressure from Tarasenko to honor that request. But there's been reports saying it's clearly still on the table, but he's aware of and okay with the possibility that may not happen until the offseason. So we'll have to see where this goes, but it's certainly a rumor that to me makes a ton of sense possibly for both teams, but a lot of it is going to depend on where these teams are at a few months down the road before they really strongly consider pulling the trigger on a real significant trade such as this. So let me know your thoughts on something discussed down below in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.